One of the first buildings in which this new honesty of expression had been consciously attempted was the east front of the Louvre, dating back from the 17th century, 1667 to 1674. But it remained a model of architecture throughout the 18th century. It was designed by Charles Perrault, a scientist. Perrault made the outline of his building almost rectangular. The long facade is almost flat, so is the outline. There's no piling up, no modeling there. Even odder is the fact that the architectural emphasis is on the linking elements, the freestanding runs of columns. The building became known, not surprisingly, as the Louvre Colonnade. Perrault was determined that his columns should not be decorative elements, but, as he thought in ancient Greek architecture, the supports of the building, strong structural supports. He introduced engineering of a very high order into his design. The columns are threaded through with bars of iron, which are linked to crossbars in the stone of the ceiling and anchored into the walls behind. Here is the initial idea that led to the development of reinforced concrete in the 20th century. Almost 100 years later, exactly these same ideas were taken up by another architect, Soufflot, when he was commissioned to build the grandest, the noblest church in all of Europe, the church known as Sainte Geneviève, called the Panthéon today. Actually, you can even see it from here, right over there. Tradition and reason were also Soufflot's concerns. He too used freestanding columns to mark out his space and also to do the actual work of supporting the vaults and dome. He wanted to combine the structural elegance of a Greek temple with the lightness of a Gothic church. Here the classical rhythms appear in the nave and aisles with their rows of Corinthian columns. Gothic is hinted at in the flying buttresses hidden above the vaults. He used the same freestanding columns carrying lintels to create a rectangular geometry on the outside too. This is called post and lintel construction. The church was a nightmare to build, but is thought of as a masterpiece of French 18th century architecture. Everyone who could went to Rome in the 18th century. It seemed to be in the center of the ancient world. It became a new center for art lovers of all kinds. Architects, artists, gentlemen and their hangers-on. Everybody went there. Soufflot went there as a companion of Madame de Pompadour's brother. Soufflot, in fact, went further south. He went down to Naples, to a place called Paestum, where there were 3 surviving Greek temples, and he measured them up. He was virtually the first architect who'd actually seen a Greek temple, let alone recorded it. Giambattista Piranesi was most upset by the idea that Greek was the divine source of architecture. He wasn't, in fact, Roman at all. He was Venetian. He'd come to Rome at the age of 19, but he climbed over the ruins, he excavated, and he recorded the past in over 1,000 views during his lifetime, not only the past, but in fact the present of Rome too. Rome was the center of his world. Copper, of course, was very expensive, and he'd put his wife's dowry into an investment into these great plates. So he was very worried indeed, thought that the French might start going off to Athens. So although he had a lot of French friends amongst these critics and architects in Rome, he started attacking them. He ridiculed Greek architecture. But then, just before he died in 1778, he himself went south to Paestum. And in 15 or 16 wonderful drawings, he conjured up the magic of Greek architecture as never before. He showed that the column that the French for so long had thought of as a structural element which they wanted to express honestly was really a piece of sculpture, a piece of beautiful sculpture. After that, with the discovery of Paestum and Greek architecture itself, the aesthetic vision of Europe changed.
So, as often in the history of Western art, changes in ways of seeing coincide with and even anticipate social change, And so it was in the build-up to the French Revolution.
The Saturday night fever of revolution began in earnest when Camille Desmoulins, a left-wing agitator, harangued an inflamed crowd here in the Palais Royal, calling for the overthrow of the monarchy and the establishment of a republic. There was rising unemployment, a growing sense of injustice, and a devastating failure of the harvest had led to a shortage of the main staple of the French diet, bread. People were exasperated. It had been seen in the American Revolution how a tyranny could be overthrown by the force of will of the people alone. And now those democratic ideals ran through the population here like wildfire.
From the moment the Bastille fell in July 1789, artists were at the center of events in a way they'd never been before. And in the career of Jacques-Louis David, art and politics have never been closer. David dominated French painting for 35 years, through the reign of Louis XVI, the Revolution, Napoleon's empire, and finally the restoration of the Bourbon kings. He had a talent not only for painting, but for survival.